Okay, story time. So the other day, it was Tuesday morning, and I'm in my Bible reading plan, my normal Bible reading plan. So I didn't do anything special. I wasn't going off book, which I have been known to do. But I stayed on the schedule, on the plan, and there was one chapter of scripture that was put on this plan. Now, this is weird because this plan that I'm on is supposed to help you get through the entire Bible chronologically in the course of 1 year. Well, for that to happen, you need to be reading like 3 minimum chapters a day for that to happen. So you can imagine where I was like, well, this is weird that there's only like the one. Now, honestly, this is kind of good for me because a lot of times with 3 chapters, there'll be like a chunk of scripture and I get stuck on it. And so it might take me 3 days to get through the 3-chapter daily reading assignment. I don't finish this plan in a year, ever. I never have. And I've done it 3 times. But I get stuck on this, like maybe one thing. In this case, on this particular Tuesday morning, 1 chapter, Psalm 133. Let's take a look at what Psalm 133 says. And this is in the NIV translation of scripture. Psalm 133, it says, "How good and pleasant it is when brothers live together in unity. It is like precious oil poured on the head, running down on the beard, running down on Aaron's beard, down upon the collar of his robes. It is as if the dew of Hermon were falling on Mount Zion, for there the Lord bestows his blessing, even life forevermore." That's all. So great. 3 verses, only 3 verses. You can imagine in my head how strange this feels because I'm accustomed to many chapters at a time, at least 3 chapters. And now I've got only 3 verses. And that's the only thing on this reading plan, which is kind of like, when something different happens, it makes it stand out. So there was already this moment Tuesday where I was like, Lord, why? What are you trying to speak? Why isolate this one thing? And I don't remember it ever being this way before. It's the same plan, literally the same piece of paper. So it's obviously been like this every time I've done this particular plan, but I don't recall having these thoughts or having this feeling of, okay, weird, only one chapter. And also only 3 verses in that chapter. That means this must be really significant. This is a significant chunk of scripture that the Lord would have me meditate on. I couldn't get out of my head. I kept thinking about this passage. I started praying it over the worship team that I serve and over just our teams in general at the church, our ministry teams in general at the church. But I kept considering this over our worship team. And the reason for that is I didn't initially read it in the NIV version. Instead, the first time I read this was in the NLT, the New Living Translation. And that word unity that it talks about, it wasn't the word unity in the NLT. The word is harmony, which got me thinking worship team, harmony, musical term, right? So that was an easy kind of jump that I made. But that's not where the story ends. I go in, it's Tuesday morning. Tuesday is staff morning day. Staff meeting morning. Are you with me? Did I just lose everybody? Staff meeting morning at church. And so I get to the church and we've been working through this one book together as a staff. So we have prayer time in the morning and then our pastor takes us through kind of some discipleship time with our whole staff. And we've been working through a book together that's been breaking down some of the tenets of our faith. And he says today, we're going to go off schedule. We're not going to do the book, even though we haven't finished the book. He's like, we're actually going to pause on that. And he said, instead, I would love for us to talk about some things that are threats to our vulnerability they're vulnerable places for us as a church, some threats to our ministry right now. And kind of what are some things that you see? Now, this is not him saying these are things that are currently going on, but more so like be a watchman on the wall. What could be some threats to what we're doing? It feels like there's this sense that we're kind of at a peak point right now as a ministry. And so I appreciated this. And he said, I'm going to give you 3 things, then I want us to discuss them. The first thing he talked about was threats to our unity, or as the NLT would call it, harmony. Now, earlier that morning, after reading this, meditating on it, praying through it, I sent a text out to the leadership team that serves, that I get to serve with for our worship team. And I said, hey, listen, I'm praying Psalm 133 over our team today. A couple people liked it. Everybody moved on with their day. I get to church. We had this conversation in our staff meeting. Again, not scheduled, so out of the norm. Just like reading this one chunk of scripture is out of the norm when it's usually 3 chapters. And now I get to staff meeting. We're not doing our normal thing. We're discussing this. And so that was one of those moments where I went, okay, Lord, I'm listening. And I started thinking through the context and dialoguing with others, the context of this word harmony and the power of this, why we need to pray through this. And I had, full disclosure, for about a week leading up to this, I had felt burdened to pray for the unity of our worship team and burdened to pray for those who are leading. And nothing has happened that I'm aware of. There's nothing that I know of that where we aren't unified or there isn't love and joy in our relationships as a team. I'm unaware. And yet still this burden to pray for this specific thing for this specific team. And then it comes up in staff meeting. We start discussing what this could really mean. When we think about the term harmony, for something to be harmonious, all these pieces are coming together and they're working together. The notes of the chord fit together beautifully. And for it to be off, all it takes is one voice not singing in tune with the others, one keyboard player who plays a white key when you should have played a black key, or a black key when you should have played a white key, one guitarist that didn't take the time to tune their instrument beforehand. All it takes is one sound and the entire thing is thrown off. One sound can disrupt the harmony of many. It's the power of one, and not in a good way. And then I started thinking beyond that, and maybe what made me feel so burdened for this is, as a singer, the longer you sustain a note, the longer you sustain a pitch, the more likely you are to drop that pitch. So it might push, or if every soprano's plague, we don't necessarily drop the pitch. We just go a little bit too high. The longer we go, we push a little too hard and get a little bit sharp, a little bit above the note. But the longer you're sustaining, the more likely you are to move away from the pitch that is supposed to be sung, even in the slightest bit. And that slightest little bit will cause the harmony to be disrupted for everyone. And maybe that's more what I had felt the burden to pray for. It's been a long time since there was disruption to our metaphorical harmony. But maybe the carrying of this for an extended moment of time, extended piece of time, the leadership team, the other worship leaders that are on our team, all of us together, the longer we're in this, the more likely we are to drop a pitch. Let's be aware. Let's take the right breath. Let's put the right tools around us to not drop the note. And that means we are taking in enough air, and we are taking breaths when we need to. We're staying true to the disciplines of how we're supposed to sing so we don't drop the note. And let's transfer that when it comes to protecting the harmony in our relationships with one another. When it comes to prioritizing that, when it comes to praying that through, let's not neglect the disciplines that we know, the foundational, fundamental disciplines that we know that we're supposed to be doing, being in our words, praying, loving one another, believing the best about one another. Because all it takes is one side conversation, one person harboring something that they didn't express, one person picking up an offense that was never intended, one person walking in with that look on their face. The power of one. Let us be on guard. Let us be cautious. Let us be about our Father's business, because where there is unity, according to Psalm 133, and this does not just apply to worship teams, to the family of God in general, where there is unity, where there is harmony, there the Lord commands his blessing, even life everlasting.